February 4, 2016. Moti Hill, Dhaka. Inside the Bangladesh Bank headquarters, a printer in a sealed room stops producing paper. The room is called the Swift Room. The printer runs all day and all night. It prints every confirmation of every transfer the central bank makes. That night, it prints nothing at all. The duty staff notice the silence on Friday morning. In Bangladesh, Friday is a weekend day. The office is nearly empty. A technician tries to restart the machine. An error message appears on the tray. The staff assume the fault is mechanical. They plan to fix it after the weekend. 7,800 miles away, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York holds an account for Bangladesh Bank. Inside that account sit just over $1 billion in foreign reserves. The money belongs to a country where the average worker earns under $4 a day. That Thursday night, instructions began arriving at the New York Fed. The instructions carried valid Bangladesh Bank credentials. They were signed with the correct SWIFT codes. Nothing about them looked wrong. There were 35 of them. Together, they requested $951 million. That was almost the entire reserve account. What nobody in Dhaka knew was that the printer had not failed. It had been disabled. Investigators later concluded that the intruders had been inside the Bangladesh Bank network for more than a year. They entered through a phishing email sent to bank employees. One employee opened an attachment. The malware spread slowly and quietly. It mapped the network. It watched how staff logged in. It recorded keystrokes and credentials. The attackers then studied the bank's own procedures. They learned exactly how a payment order was created. They learned who approved it and when. They learned that the printer in the Swift room was the only physical record of each transfer. So they wrote software that targeted that printer. The malware also altered the bank's Swift database. It hid the outgoing messages from the operators. It changed the balance figures displayed on screen. For roughly 30 hours, the central bank of a nation could not see its own money moving. The timing was not accidental. February 4 was a Thursday. The Bangladeshi weekend began at the end of that day. The New York Fed remained open on Friday. Manila was preparing for the Chinese New Year holiday. The attackers had chosen a window where 3 financial calendars did not overlap. At the New York Fed, an automated system reviewed the 35 orders. 30 were flagged and held. The reason was procedural. The payment instructions were missing correspondent bank details. Another detail drew attention as well. One address line contained the word Jupiter. A shipping company under United States sanctions carried the same name. The filter did not know it was reading a street in Makati City. It stopped the batch anyway. 5 orders had already passed. They totaled $101 million. $20 million went to a bank in Sri Lanka. $81 million went to 4 accounts at a branch of the Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation in Manila. The branch stands on Jupiter Street in Makati City. The Sri Lankan transfer was intended for an organization the attackers had named the Shalika Foundation. But the instruction did not say Foundation. It said Fandation. A routing clerk at Deutsche Bank, which was handling the transaction, noticed the misspelling. The word was wrong by 1 letter. That single letter triggered a request for clarification. The clarification went back to Bangladesh Bank. Bangladesh Bank had no record of the transfer. The $20 million was frozen. Pan Asia Banking Corporation, which had received the funds, returned the money. The $81 million in Manila was already gone. On Friday, February 5, Bangladesh Bank staff tried to reach New York. They sent messages through the SWIFT system asking for the transfers to be stopped. New York was closed for the weekend by then. Dhaka then tried the telephone. The Fed required written confirmation through secure channels. The 2 institutions spent 3 days unable to speak to each other. By Monday, February 8, the Philippines had begun the Chinese New Year holiday. Banks in Manila were shut. When Bangladesh finally sent a formal recall request, the money had already moved twice. The 4 accounts at the Jupiter Street branch had been opened 9 months earlier, in May 2015. Each was opened with $500. Each used identification documents that investigators later determined were forged. The account sat untouched for 9 months. On February 5, 2016, all four came alive at once. The money was converted from dollars into Philippine pesos. It moved into an account belonging to a currency exchange operator. From there, it traveled to two casinos, the Solaire Resort in Manila and the Midas Hotel and Casino. The choice of destination mattered. In 2016, Philippine casinos were legally exempt from the country's anti-money laundering reporting rules. Once the funds entered a casino, they left the traceable banking system. Inside the casinos, the money was used to buy gaming chips. Junket operators ran private rooms with imported players. Chips were played, exchanged, and cashed out. Each cycle stripped away the money's history. By the time investigators arrived, the paper trail ended at a gaming table. Back in Dhaka, the truth surfaced slowly. On Saturday, February 6, staff restored the printer manually. The backlog began to print. Page after page of confirmations emerged for transfers nobody had authorized. The governor of Bangladesh Bank, Atiur Rahman, was not immediately informed. The bank tried for weeks to recover the money quietly. The public learned of the theft only when Philippine newspapers reported it in late February. On March 15, 2016, Atiur Rahman resigned. Two deputy governors were removed the same week. The investigation split across four countries. Bangladesh, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and the United States each opened files. In the Philippines, the Senate held televised hearings. The branch manager of the Jupiter Street office, Maya Santos de Guito, testified that she had been pressured by superiors. In 2019, she was convicted on 8 counts of money laundering. She was sentenced to decades in prison and fined the full amount that passed through her branch. A businessman named Kim Wong, who operated a junket at one of the casinos, voluntarily returned roughly $15 million in cash. The money was delivered in a suitcase and in cardboard boxes. In 2018, the Philippine Central Bank fined the Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation 1 billion pesos. It was the largest penalty ever imposed on a Philippine bank. The United States Department of Justice reached a different conclusion about who was responsible. In September 2018, prosecutors filed a criminal complaint against a North Korean computer programmer named Park Jin-hyuk. The complaint ran to 179 pages. It linked the Bangladesh bank intrusion to a group researchers call Lazarus. It connected the same group to the 2014 attack on Sony Pictures and to the WannaCry ransomware outbreak of 2017. The complaint alleged that Park worked for a front company operating in Dalian, China. North Korea denied that he exists. The evidence was technical. Analysts found identical fragments of code across the different attacks. They found the same encryption method. They found the same habit of wiping logs on the way out. The forensic teams also found something else. The attackers had tested their printer malware in advance. They knew the exact model. They knew the exact file paths. Investigators also examined how the intrusion could have been stopped earlier. Bangladesh Bank had connected its SWIFT terminal to the rest of its internal network. Security consultants had warned against that arrangement. The network used inexpensive switches with no firewall between segments. Once the attackers were inside, nothing separated the ordinary office computers from the machine that moved $1 billion. Of the $81 million that reached Manila, Bangladesh has recovered less than a quarter. Bangladesh Bank filed a civil lawsuit in New York in 2019. The case has moved through the courts for years. SWIFT changed its security requirements for member banks after the attack. It introduced a mandatory customer security program in 2017. Every member institution was required to attest to a list of controls each year. Banks that refused could be reported to their regulators. The organization had spent 40 years assuming its members were secure. Central banks around the world reviewed how their payment terminals were isolated. Several discovered similar weaknesses. The Bangladesh Bank building on Motijil Avenue still stands. The reserve account at the New York Fed is still open. The stolen amount was $81 million. One misspelled word saved another 20.